you're the kind of channel I just love on YouTube, is somebody who has a channel that is so passionate about some specific thing. And in watching your videos, that passion really comes out. You had a video about kind of things that you wish you had known before you started rowing. And it was just like, it was so motivational. I'm like, okay, I'm going to start rowing now. But before we get into that, I want you to take us back before you even started the YouTube channel, and what got you interested in fitness and specifically in rowing.
Wow. So fitness, for some reason, my entire life, since as far back as I can remember, sports were something that just interested me. And I loved sports. I always was playing sports, anything I could get my hands on. Still remember walking off the playground one day with my dad, holding his hand when I'm 7, looking up at my dad. And I wanted to know his history of being an athlete in sports, and he had no history of being an athlete. He was not a physical guy, and something about the rest of my life just kind of kept revolving around sport. But I was never great at it. Let's make no bones about it. I was not a good athlete. I just loved sports, and so I always rode the pine for kind of whatever I was involved in. And went to school in Minnesota, so I had no exposure to rowing, anything like that. When I got to college, I played a couple of years of club baseball and then transferred schools to the University of San Diego. And so I became an athlete kind of without a sport. And it was the first time in my life where I hadn't had anything in front of me. And the guy across the hall from me had been recruited to row, and he looked me up and down and said, "Hey, you're 6'3", you should think about giving rowing a try." And that the rest is history. I stepped foot into kind of an educational seminar about what rowing was. I figured, why not give it a try? Oh, you have to wake up at 5 a.m. Okay, I guess I can stomach that in college. And I just fell in love with it. It was something about the sport grabbed me immediately. I don't know why, but it did. It was the first thing that came naturally to me, I guess. And then just had this amazing 4-year run. We were at a really small school. Our team we were really like ragtag. We were all dark horses. Like, nobody expected us to do anything. Our school had no past history of good rowing. And 12 of us just kind of bonded together, stuck together for 4 years. And we ended up going to the national championships our senior year. So it was like just this really wonderful experience that I had. So I think through that, I fell in love with it and then wanted to kind of share that.
And at that time, that was on water rowing?
Correct. Yeah, that was real rowing. That was getting in boats, putting oars in the water, all of that. Yeah.
What are your thoughts about people calling it real rowing versus not real rowing, fake rowing? What are the alternatives?
It's indoor rowing, I guess, is kind of, then that's really where I've niched into. Is I teach indoor rowing for the fitness community. So I don't even teach indoor rowing to rowers. And that's just kind of how I piece it out in my brain. It's all rowing at the end of the day. It all fall under the umbrella of rowing, but you've got on-water rowing, you have coastal rowing, you have indoor rowing. So there are just different facets of it.
Interesting.
Is there drama in between the two? Like, do they like?
Yes.
I never indoor row.
Absolutely. I actually just got done emceeing the Indoor Rowing World Championships about a month ago. It was virtual for the first time this year, which was interesting. And there is definitely, I don't know if animosity is the right word, but there's some of the headbutting that happens between the indoor rowing community and the rowing community, because indoor rowing, you don't have to look perfect. You don't have to create perfect rowing to still be decent on the machine. You could be incredibly fit. You could be 6'7" and come from basketball, and you have a really great aerobic capacity, and you just luck into being really good on the machine, but your technique does not look like rowing on the water technique. And so on-water rowers will see that and be frustrated that, somebody without good technique could beat them. And so there's some of that.
What are some of the differences between on-water rowing and machine rowing as far as the movement patterns and physicality of it?
The way that I've always explained it is that rowing on a machine is like learning to ride a four-wheeler. It has a seat, it has pedals, you have handlebars, brakes. You get the idea of how the system works. And so you can sit on it comfortably. It's very simple. You're not risking tipping over or anything like that. And then going to learn to row on water is like taking the skill that you learned on a four-wheeler and shifting to a unicycle. Oh. You have the same components involved, but it becomes exponentially more complicated.
And on water, you're usually with more people rowing at the same time.
You can go anywhere from a single up to 8. And so you go in 1, 2, 4, or 8. And then there are different types of rowing, sweep and sculling. It depends on whether you have 1 big oar or 2 small oars. Yeah.
Are you looking forward to the Olympics this year?
I'm fingers crossed, hoping that we get to see it. Yeah.
I hope so. I always enjoy watching the Olympics, and the rowing on there is especially fascinating. Is there a way of recreating that, multiple people in an indoor rowing, or is it always a single rower?
There are ways of doing it. It's very space cumbersome, so it's not done very often, but you use a thing called sliders, and they're essentially floating tracks. It's just a metal frame with a floating track on it, and you can put the nose of one machine on one track and the tail of that machine on a different track, and then you can put a second machine behind you that matches up to the track of the machine in front of it. And then you have 8 people, and you have to all make it move together, and it'll throw you off if you're not doing it right. So yeah.
So you've gone from competitive rowing in school, national championships on the last year, you said?
Yeah.
How do you go from that and transition into, opening up a business? And tell us a little bit about the origin story of Dark Horse Rowing. So
post-college, when I was in college, our strength and conditioning program at the University of San Diego was CrossFit. Our head strength coach brought CrossFit to our school, so we all became CrossFitters without knowing it. And this is 2005, before CrossFit was really cool. Or I should say 2006. So we were doing this thing that was brand new to the world. And we gave it a lot of credit for how we became successful when we were rowing. So post-college, I didn't really have much of a future in being a competitive rower. And the only place you can really go is into the elite level. So you're trying to make it to the Olympics or World Championships. I wasn't big enough. I didn't have the scores. So I didn't see a future there. So I switched over to CrossFit and started competing in CrossFit. I ended up going to the CrossFit Games 4 times. And in that process, started coaching because CrossFit was using so much rowing. So I saw the rowing machine everywhere, and nobody knew how to use it, and nobody was teaching it. And I had this knowledge of how to do it. And now I understood CrossFit. So my first job out of college was selling life insurance. Hated that. And so after 9 months, I quit with no plan, but I happened to be a member at this CrossFit gym, asked if I could start coaching for them, which I did, then started putting on my own seminars, then got contacted by the company that makes the rowing machine that's probably most prolific in the industry. They'd heard about the seminars. They asked if I would become their head coach. So I took that position, started doing their seminars around the world. And then through that process, started to meet more people and realized that there was room for this information, and really started to take things online in 2015 was when I started Dark Horse. It was just because I could only teach somebody that was in front of me, and I wanted to have a bigger impact. And there was nothing out there. Nobody had figured out how to teach rowing, which is just inherently very physical and kinesthetic, and nobody had taught without hands-on. And so I really wanted to crack that nut, and that's the origin of Dark Horse. It was me figuring out, how can I teach this incredibly complex, not natural movement to somebody who doesn't care about rowing. They might just own a rowing machine. They don't need to love rowing. I'm not trying to convince them to love the sport. I just want to help them be fit. And so how do I dose that in small bits and do it without ever seeing the person face to face?
Did it start out as wanting to do both people who are using it to exercise and also training coaches, or did that kind of come a little bit later?
Dark Horse started more with the B2C side. I was attempting to reach the end user first while still teaching these seminars traveling. And so that was for the B2B side, if you will, teaching trainers more of the professional education. We found out in 2016 that we were going to have our first child. And when that happened, we found out we were pregnant, and I realized I didn't want to be traveling anymore to make money, make a living. And so I contacted the company and said, hey, now that I've been online teaching people, I have a decent understanding of how the online course world works and how to teach people without being there. If I could take this course, put it in video format, and run it that way, would you guys be okay with that? And they said, yeah, gave me the green light. And so I built that out. So in 2017, July is when I took that seminar online, and I haven't been traveling since.